So starting in 2001, we did our first zero energy building, and we've been really focused on that for the last 17 years. And today we kind of think, you know, we need to shift away from zero energy to zero emissions. We think it's kind of the wrong metric. We've got so much green renewable energy available, and so we're sort of starting to try and change the way our brains think. It's hard to make that change. We've been talking about energy efficiency for so long. We talk about energy modeling, and we're trying to shift our brain and our tools and our process to think about emissions. So here was that first project in 2001, a little nature center off the grid, all electric. A few years later, a commercial office building for an electrical engineer. We didn't know what to call it. We didn't have the word zero energy, so we call it Z squared. That was, thank you. You know, small, but a sort of demonstration project. Those projects gave us the confidence, click. Those projects gave us the confidence to scale up to the Packard Foundation at 50,000 square feet. And then a couple years later, click, that gave us the confidence to do the Exploratorium, a 200,000 square foot energy intensive science museum. So these were kind of, you know, demonstration projects. These were projects with clients that had a vision, that wanted to push the envelope a little bit. They were willing to spend a little bit more to do that. And that was a wonderful thing. Click. I have to say, though, now that in the last few years, it seems like it's gotten pretty easy. And I'm serious about that. Title 24 has raised the floor a lot. A lot of the things we used to brag about doing are now in the code. The solar power purchase agreements are now cheaper than most of our clients are paying for their utility. So if you have space for solar, any building can be a zero energy building cheaper than a non-zero energy building. If the power purchase agreement is really cheaper, it's astonishing. This 100,000 square foot spec office building for a developer in Boulder, PVs on the wall displaced the cladding, so it actually had the same performance per dollar because we didn't have to pay for that cladding. We currently have 4 schools, either recently completed or in construction, that are all electric, zero energy, done within the conventional school budget. It just does not seem that hard anymore.
That is an amazing building. Whatever you're showing us there, that completely vertically solar panel covered. That's
Boulder Commons. RMI is a tenant in there. Click. Next one. 4 schools. Sorry. Click. So we all know about this duck curve, and as Mozzie just pointed out, people often think about it as a grid harmonization thing, but I look at it and I think about, you know, low carbon green energy, and I see, wow, that belly of that duck is really clean, low carbon energy. And so I want to design my building to use energy during that time and not during the other times. So what's the opposite of a duck? Click. It's a camel. So I want to design a camel building to solve duck curves. Next slide, click. So this is a graph of the Packard Foundation's net energy use over 5 different years. And so you can see that curve is going up in July, and then so we're exporting to the grid, and then it starts going back down during the winter, down, 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 and down, and then it starts going back up. So that duck curve is a daily thing. This is a seasonal thing. We're exporting and importing from the grid at different times at different levels of carbon emissions. And so we always knew we were doing that, but it was too hard to figure out what to do about it then. Well, now is the time to figure that out. So that's what we're starting to work on. I'm doing a project down at UC San Diego, and they have this deep carbonization initiative, which somebody spoke about earlier today. I was poking around their website, and this guy, Steve Brick, had this amazing presentation. I didn't hear it, but I looked at his presentation. The link's on there, so you guys can check it out. And this gets at, I think it was Jim's question earlier. So here's at a high penetration of renewables in California, and you'll see that those middle bars, May and June, really high renewable energy availability. And then, wow, look what happens between June and July. It just drops in half. And then you go down to the winter and the renewables are really low. The premise of his paper is that the seasonality, click, sorry if I forgot. So click, now we have the picture of Elon Musk up there. is that we can do storage on a daily basis, but it's this seasonal basis that's the really wicked hard problem, is what his case is. And how do we solve that? You know, how can we as design professionals solve that? Click. And so, you know, when I saw Martha present this, it was like it just knocked my socks off. I couldn't think of an animal that was this shape, so I don't have one of those.
Fish.
Maybe. And so how do we design our buildings to use more energy in the green squares and less energy during the red times? And, you know, what are those energy use? So I'm going to click ahead to the 2030 version. So that was clicked, Building Perspective 2030. And, you know, so the nighttime red squares, you know, that's a lot of winter heating. There's also some, you know, nighttime July, August, September. So I don't know, maybe that's cooling. So some of you guys will know better than I will. And
That's the base plant can't shut down.
This is gas. They're dirty.
yeah. So that, you know, if you look at the scale, it's relative to natural gas, you know, percent cleaner or percent dirtier. And so from this dark green to this sort of medium red, it's a 350% delta. It's a COP of 3.5. And wow, I'm racking my brain trying to save another 5% better than Title 24. And here I can save 350% better if I shift the time of my building.
Time of year.
Time of year, exactly right. So California, LB&L did this great report that I saw presented. Click, sorry, 2025 California Demand Response. Click. And they put these different demand response desires on this time scale. So seconds on the right, in the middle, it's more this daily thing, which I think a lot of people think about when they think about demand response. But it's that left-hand one, shape, that I think is really interesting. Click. And my hypothesis is, in this presentation, is that that's where architecture and enclosure can really make a contribution. That daily thing may be more about batteries and heat pumps and smart appliances and all that other stuff that doesn't really control on an annual basis. So what do we do on the architecture and enclosure? Click. Some years ago, I did a lab at Stanford for Chris Field, a great climate scientist and just a real person who educated me a lot. And we converted a 100-year-old cabin into a passive house for him. He was in a redwood forest. He had no solar access. I went and had lunch with him recently, and he said, you know, this building is so stable. It just rides for days without changing temperature. And we know that the peak loads in the winter are really low. They also said it was super quiet, and not even an ant could get into that house. It was so tight. And so, you know, my theory is that the passive house strategies are a good fit for reducing our energy use when it's the dirtiest. And should our energy model or our emissions model give us 3.5 times credit or double credit or whatever it is for those dirty hours? And so, you know, you all know these strategies: excellent insulation, reduced thermal bridges, airtight enclosure, high performance windows, heat recovery ventilation. Click. So Title 24 has done a great job, in my view, on the insulation levels, and with the exterior insulation on reducing thermal bridging a lot. And so can we make progress on these items 3 through 5? Click. So Stefan and Stet did this great presentation at the Passive House Conference last year that is spot on this topic. And so I talked to those guys and, you know, made sure we were on the same page. They modeled 3 different houses in 3 different climate zones. They did it at different seasons. I'm showing you the winter day. And you'll see that, and this is code minimum in a passive house version, and it's with solar to get to 0 energy. And so you see those daily load profiles. So if you look at the middle chart on the bottom, Sacramento, the gray line is Title 24, and the blue line is passive house. So during those dark red squares in the winter nights, its peak is, or it's using half as much as the Title 24 house. And if you then multiply that by the carbon factor of 2 or 3 or whatever it is, you know, it's even exaggerated that much more. And likewise, it can have a much smaller solar system, so it's not as peaky on the downward side.
What is a 0.5 projection size?
Oh,
Oh,
that's
shading.
shading. Yeah, yeah. That's solar shading. Yeah. Okay, so what do we do with all that stuff as architects? You know, I'm thinking about this as an architect. What do we do? So we have this school right now. It's under construction. We're in Country Day School. I've been working out there for 20 years, and we were detailing this when I had this idea. And so we went back and looked at some of our old schools out there on campus. This is the last one we did 4 or 5 years ago. And we got one of these nifty infrared cameras. It was only $499. Every architect should have one. And I could look at the detail, and you see we had this concrete curb at the bottom of the building that we really liked. It rooted the building in the site. It was durable. But you look at it through the infrared camera, and you see that thermal bridging just losing heat. So that, you know, you can't unsee that. So we changed our detail. We went back and looked at the Packard Foundation, and we had these wood plank ceilings that extended out past the roof edge, and you see air leaks coming out there and taking the heat with it. And we had an air sealing detail, but it was too hard to build. It didn't work. So on this new building, we sort of said, okay, we're gonna call for some air sealing. We're gonna detail all the thermal bridging. We did a little axon. We explained what we're trying to do to the contractor in simple language. I know you can't see all these details, but we looked at all our details for thermal bridging and air sealing. We generated a bunch of standard details that can now be applied to our other teams can steal for their projects. I went to the Pacific Coast Builders Fair a couple weeks ago. Air sealing products all over the place. You know, they weren't there 7 or 8 years ago, but they're there now. There's great resources. Seattle's doing amazing work. Army Corps of Engineers doing amazing work. We can do that air sealing. It's not that hard. So those were the ones we weren't getting to, right? Is that we got the insulation, we got the thermal bridging, but the air sealing, the heat recovery ventilator, the energy recovery ventilator. This one snuck up on me. I didn't see this coming. We did a Zender heat recovery in that passive house 7 years ago, but now I've got several projects, and unbeknownst to me, they had energy recovery ventilators in. And so this was, I was just talking to Stet Sanborn and Shannon Allison at Integral, and they're reducing the ventilation load by about 2/3. And so these are Stet's comments. We can get a 65% reduction in the ventilation heating load. We can downsize, therefore, our heat pumps and make them less expensive. He's used them on all of his projects in the last 3 years, and he says they're going to be mandatory in 1 to 2 code cycles. In case you guys didn't know. That's it. Yeah. The one we haven't made much progress in, we did triple glazing on Packard and on that passive house retrofit. You know, there was a premium for those things. So we haven't gotten that on most of our projects. But we've been working, not working with, we've been learning from Lawrence Berkeley Labs, Steve Selkowitz, and Robert Hart. And they're working on this drop-in thin triple replacement. It's the same thickness as a standard insulated glass unit, so that Anderson or any other manufacturer can drop that in as a glass option and get double the performance of that window. It means you just say you just swap it out. You just say, instead of your standard glass of this, or this, add this one. So it's the same thickness. It doesn't add a lot of weight, so they don't have to redesign their frames. No, or retrofit. Anybody that replaces their windows. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the IGU. It's a standard IGU that fits any of their window frames.
For a second, was that?
Yeah.
Steve wants me to talk to. So what we're doing, this concept that he's talking about, we're forming a collaborative. We call it the California High Efficiency Window Collaborative. And it involves the Energy Commission, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, the CDIA builders, PG&E and SCE. And the goal of the collaborative is basically to identify and remove the barriers for high efficiency windows. And this is one of the technologies to essentially effective market transformation from the standard windows with a U factor of 0.30 to high efficiency window, which we define it with a U factor of 0.20. So that's something that undertaken and stay tuned.
Is dynamic glazing involved in that too?
It could be any, technology neutral. It could be your standard triple pane windows with 3 panes of glass, or the thin glass that I'm talking about. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And it would affect the SMGs.
So we're on the Lawrence Berkeley Labs Anderson Windows triple glazing slide. Click. Bar charts. This is really interesting to me. The reason it's affordable now is the prices of Krypton have collapsed because their primary market was halogen bulbs, and the prices of thin glass has dropped because everybody's making large flat screen LED screens now. So it's a commodity product. So they're estimating the payback in 6 years. But for us, you can't see it very well in this photograph, but there is a radiator all along that exterior wall that was very expensive, that has lots of piping and enclosure associated with it. So I think it would pay for more than pay for itself in many perimeter applications up front. And so with that, I have one more slide. So those were the 5 passive house strategies. Click, move to the pie chart. Plug loads. These plug loads are just taken over, and we're over here working on all these little tiny slices of the pizza. And we've got to find a way to tackle those. So we need to add that to those passive house strategies in order to address those dirty, high carbon hours of the power grid on an annual basis. And so with that, I will stop.